Let's go. We're back. Celo podcast number 4, I think. Yep. John McCoy, All Phase Athletics.
What's up, guys?
Thanks for joining us today, man. Appreciate it. Yeah. Been my trainer for a long time. Just give the people a little intro of who you are and what you do.
Okay, so like Lucas said, my name is John McCoy. I have my master's degree in sports science, and I own All Phase Athletics, where we work with developing athletes and people for health and fitness.
How long have you been doing this?
I've been a trainer for about 12 years now.
Yep.
Nice.
Out here in Miami, Florida, just so that people know. If you want to get better, this is the place to go. But who are some of the people that you've trained that have, kind of stood out to you athletically over your career?
I mean, well, you're gonna set yourself up for success here because you're definitely
Besides
one of the
me.
more athletic people. So more notable people would be like the Cameron and Cayden very athletic.
Pretty good basketball players, I would say.
Yeah,
Pretty good.
they're great players, great people, work hard. I trained MJ Melendez for a long time. He's very
Big leaguer.
athletic. He was able to go from catcher position to an outfielder to get on the field faster.
Yep.
I mean, there's a lot of different people. Med Albiali, he was a professional boxer.
Boxer, absolutely.
Rodney Smith, he was NFL and CFL wide receiver, played at Florida State.
Some
Just
pretty
different people, different ages. Those are like the professional athletes. But regular people and young kids are also awesome to work with. Anyone just looking to develop and just get better themselves.
What's like a common trait that you see amongst the best athletes that you work with?
Consistency. And just willing to adapt and better their game in areas that, may not be their favorite areas to focus on, but they're weaker spots, and they know it's an addressing issue where it's going to be a limitation for their development and longevity.
Yeah.
What made you want to become a strength coach?
When I was younger, I played baseball and football, so always a big sports guy. I really enjoyed the training process of it, and it was a kind of a mental relief for me after my playing days were over, and just kind of something I've always really cared to do. I want to stay in athletics, help people with their health. I found a lot of value in meeting people personally, and I just always had a passion for fitness and health and being in an athletic environment.
Yeah. Do you come from sports your whole life, playing sports?
Yeah, I mean, when I was a kid, we just, in the neighborhood, every sport that you can imagine, whatever kind of the day was, we would do like Olympics where we pick teams and, do random, tennis ball, baseball, then basketball, then football, throughout the day. And then, as I continue to get older, each sport kind of passes by, and I was probably best at baseball, but not quite on your guys' level, but now I'm trying to do it more on, the professional side.
Yeah, well, you're helping people reach that next level. That's what I felt, training with you. I took, big steps in my game every single year. But yeah, what are some things that you would tell high school baseball players to do to reach that next level when it comes to strength training?
So first off, like we mentioned, how the professionals get there and stay there is be consistent, be diligent, and make sure you have focus on the areas that your body really needs, not just what you like to do. From that, make sure your training is functional, make sure you're working overall athleticism, not neglecting any specific parts, even if it doesn't directly mean something for your swing or your pitching mechanics. And then just making sure everything has a purpose. There's a plan, there's a reason, it's not spontaneous, and as your body continues to develop, make sure that your training adapts so that way you're not stagnant throughout your process.
You say make training functional. Can you dive into what that means a little bit? Like what is functional, what is not functional for the people out there?
Okay, so functionality is basically just being able to move your body throughout space and move in different patterns. So like a squat or a hinge, lateral lunge, rotational components, making sure your body's able to move versus just lifting weights, like a bodybuilding approach. So you don't want to think of your strength training as muscle groups. You want to think of it as movement patterns and kind of having.
So rather than like a push-pull, more of can you get more into detail?
So there's a lot of variance, but how many people train is more, instead of even push-pull, that's like a step forward in the right direction. It's
Like
more
back and buys
or
yeah.
today I'm doing calves and shoulders, or more muscle groups,
Yeah.
which again isn't necessarily totally wrong, but it's not going to have as much transfer to sport development.
Yeah.
So you want your body to work with synchronization. You want basically your muscles to know how to sling system together, so these muscles kind of attach, and these muscles are going to work in that pattern that matters to your sport, versus like an isolated bicep curl, which will help you look good and might be fun, but it won't have quite the transfer.
A lot of people don't know the anatomy of the body and aren't nearly on the level that you are, or have a trainer like you around. So like, what are some baby steps in the right direction to go from that bodybuilding mindset, or like very standard just bicep curl mindset, to get them into a more sport specific workout?
Okay, so you first, if you're able to be with a professional, they'll probably have you go through an assessment where they look at your biomechanics. But say, money might be a crunch, or you're just looking for general basics, you want to think of, what does my sport require of me, and what are the movements that kind of go into those sports. And you're not trying to simulate every little thing, but you want to have those muscles that are, again, firing together, working together in your training, so that way it transfers over. So instead of maybe a Russian twist for your core, you might want to have a med ball toss, so that's
into a wall.
Into a wall, exactly. So it's going to have a lot more force development. It's going to be more specific to actual firing and rate coding, versus just kind of working your obliques, in a relatively remedial way.
Diving right off of that, can you talk about what your thoughts and what you do with your athletes about intensity? Is it more about learning the movement pattern and then dialing up the intensity? Are you a guy who really wants guys pushing all the time? Because I know there's the whole fast moving, slow moving, things like that.
So every answer is, it depends on who we're working with and kind of what's going on. Where are you at in your development? How often have you trained before, or for how long? And just how old are you, and all these other variables. But you should, can you rephrase the question so make sure I don't go on a tangent?
So like phasing almost,
Yeah,
right?
sure.
Like how I think it kind of has to do with what season you're in. Like for
Yeah.
a baseball player in their season in the spring, for college athletics, it's going to be more of a maintenance. In the off season, it's going to be more of a build up.
Right.
So can you dive into that a little bit, and the psychology behind it?
For sure. So first phase should be basically foundational, making sure you understand the movements. That could be slower paced, and you want quality mechanics, and that's way above intensity to make sure you're doing it right. You don't injure yourself and set yourself backwards, right? From there, once you have a foundation, then you should work in phases where you're developing like general strength qualities, and making sure that you're getting stronger, more athletic. And then from there, as you're closer to season, or potentially even in season, that should be way more fast, explosive work with super high intensity before the season. And then when the season comes, it might be a little bit dynamic depending on fatigue levels. And then as far as movement patterns and like explosiveness, some of your work should be super explosive, but not all. Like where there is some high benefits of bracing and making sure your core is strong, like plank variations or isometric band holds. But at the same time, your program should be very dynamic and systematic to wherever you are and your season is.
Yeah. So like building up to the season, you want to kind of peak. You want to like get as fast and as strong as possible. During the season, you kind of want to just build, your core and build that maintenance and kind of revolve around that, and just touch that max strength kind of every once in a while to make sure it's still there. There's something that you taught me, is that, the max strength, like when we talk about max deadlifts, you only really need to touch it like once every 30 days to really maintain it. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. So there's something called periodization, and that's, again, setting up your training system to make sense of where you want to be best at. So to keep it even simpler, instead of a season, let's think of like an Olympic trial. You want to basically make sure your body's as primed for that trial day as possible, and then you'll reset your cycle again for the actual Olympics again. So it's peaking at a certain point in time, and then from that, there should be phases in your training. So like say you're working strength, since you mentioned that, you can hold a vast majority, if not all, of your strength values for about 30 days out. So say you had a max deadlift day or whatever variable you might want to use, that strength that you gained is going to stick in your body and almost not lose any of it, even if you don't train the deadlift for 30 days.
Yeah.
So you can periodize that strength, and then now you work muscular, power for the next time, and then max end speed right before the event, and all those blocks are kind of hitting at the same time.
Yeah.
Whereas if you didn't do the speed work for 30 days, you would get slower significantly over the course of that time.
That means more consistent maintenance.
Exactly.
Rather than, essentially you don't need to max deadlift every week or like you can, or twice a week. You can just do it.
Correct. And you only need small dosages to keep a lot of those results, is how I say it's like called minimal effective dosage. And then also with that, like again, mentioning the speed, like if you don't do any plyometrics or sprint work, you might not see a significant difference because sprint speed is very, very small to see any difference, but that could have a large outcome difference in your sporting event or your velocity or your swing path or certain things that are going to be very critical for your athleticism, where if you can squat 450 or you can squat 475, it doesn't make much of a difference on the field. Of course, more could be better, but also more time and that could be worse, where you're getting stiffer, slower, and other qualities that don't transfer to your sport.
Yeah, those tenths of a second is the difference between hitting 280 and 300. A couple more infield base hits, during a season, and that's a pretty big difference.
Correct. Even on that, not even just like infield hits, because some people won't relate with that as much, is the exit velocity on the ball, having the power on it. Maybe now that spraying ball through the middle is now into the gap as a double or a triple instead of just a single. So like the small things kind of transfer onto the field much more than just general strength levels.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about being a strength coach for a team, or what makes you want to stay private individually?
So when I first got into the field, I actually thought that's what I really wanted to do. And then one of my first main internships was with a company called Fast Twitch, and I worked individual setting for the vast majority, where some team setting more like they would hire us to come in at times. And I enjoyed the personal relationships and like feeling like I had a lot of control in someone's program. I even did another internship with FIU Strength and Conditioning to see more of the college team setting. And it's just so much managing the players versus actually having as much of an impact that it wasn't really what I was looking for. There's a lot of value in it. It's just a little bit different in a lot of ways.
So what would a piece of advice be? So you train Lucas for a long time, then he goes off, he gets sent to another strength coach, and he's in the gym with 40, 45 guys at a time. Like, piece of advice for that transition period from being very individualized to very team-oriented focused in his training.
So first, don't go and try to prove a point to your strength coaches, because they're trying their best to do their job, and even if they know what they're doing, it's really challenging to be as perfect with that volume of people at once, especially with a lot of times the head coaches are making them do certain things that they don't even want to do in the first place.
Yep.
But as an athlete, going into that with that open mind of, okay, this guy's trying his best, this might be awesome or it might be terrible, you have to know you might have to do certain things on your own or try your best to accommodate the training system. So say they have you doing certain weights and reps, you know that you're best suited to have maybe the lift for velocity versus max strength. At times you might be able to get away with small little like deviations in your training where you're not arguing with the coach, but you're still making it better than it would be if you only listen to them. And then you're probably gonna have to do certain things like your specific mobility routines on your own, or things that are non-fatiguing, so that way you're not adding a lot of extra stress to your body, but maybe hitting the areas that they weren't able to hit with a group of 30, 40 guys.
Nice.
Yeah. I mean, people in college, they get there and it's way different. You go from high school where you're training one-on-one, like I have a strength coach who's seeing everything I'm doing and it's only like me, and like I'm making huge strides. You get into college and you think, oh, it's going to be a college program, like I'm going to get huge. I mean, like, yes, but you're kind of on your own. Like you're the strength coach is there and he will help you, but he's also managing 30, 40 other people at the same time. So and you have 1 hour to lift. So it's tough. You got to be on top of your game and kind of just be willing to learn and grow on your own.
It's like that even for your skill-specific stuff, where you don't want to show up your head coach even if you think how their approach on a certain pitch or swing is what you're looking for. You got to be respectful. You got to play the politics game of it, and ultimately you probably chose that school for a reason. That coach probably knows something, so take what you really value from them, and then areas that you don't agree, be cordial and just make sure that they understand that you're listening to them, but maybe don't do 1,000 reps of something you don't totally agree on.
That makes sense. I know, especially in college, high school, even a little bit out of college, pre-workout, energy drinks, and everything like that are a big, big topic. So I'd like to get your thoughts on that. I've had some questions on like what do you think about energy drinks or pre-workout? But I personally go with like the coffee, the honey, a couple dates, things like that. But I would love to hear your thoughts on all those kind of pre-workouts and the energy drinks.
So, especially in college, usually sleep is a huge issue. People are, staying out later, maybe not having the most optimal patterns, so they're usually under-recovered. So they have to use a stimulant to get their body up to make sure that they have to when they train, they can do it with intensity and focus. So optimally, you're doing the main things up front, like sleeping well, eating well, and getting certain macronutrients in your body, so that way your body's already kind of like ahead of the game. But if you're not, then pre-workouts could be potentially effective at times, but then you get dependent on them. And many of the ingredients in them are kind of eyewash or just like overkill. Like you don't need 400 milligrams of caffeine to have a good workout, where maybe closer to 80 to potentially like 200 could be a little bit more appropriate. But then you get dependent on it. So like the coffee is a much safer, healthier approach where you know what it is. It's from a bean. It's very simplistic versus some fancy energy drink in a lab. And those things taste good, and it will feel energizing from certain components they have in them, and many of them, as long as they're NSF certified, will be safe for you to some capacity at least. But ideally more natural, and not leaning on stimulants to get up for every workout is a better avenue. But everything's in context, because again, if you stayed up all night and then you have a workout with your head coach watching at 6 a.m., you better be there, you better be doing well.
You gotta bring it.
So try to stay away from it if possible.
Yeah, well, we lived it, the late night with just hanging out with friends, making noise, and then waking up early, 7 a.m. lift, then class for 3 hours, then you have to try to grab lunch in 20 minutes, and then you go to the field for 6 hours at a time for practice, then go home and study, and then hang out with your friends again and do it again the next day. What's your advice? Because you crash during your day. Like when you go to class, it's like hard to stay awake sometimes. So you can't just be drinking energy drinks all day long, even though some people do. What's your advice to kind of keep the energy levels up naturally? Obviously, sleep's a big one, but it's almost impossible sometimes when you have roommates that are just making a bunch of noise and stuff. Like, what are some other ways that you can kind of keep your energy levels pretty high?
You just have to plan ahead, first of all. Like, kind of having an idea and kind of having things in front of you is going to make those errors less likely. Things are going to come up, situations are going to be tough, but you want to make sure that you have a good idea of how many calories you've been burning, what the demands of the week are, so that way you actually have the right amount of nutrients to fill your body. Like, you shouldn't be in much of a deficit, in athletics. Like, that means that your body's inflamed and you're possibly losing weight, lean muscle mass, and other qualities that are going to make it really difficult for you to perform your best. Making sure that you're recovering in the sense of getting enough protein in your body, so that way you're recovering optimally and getting the maximum results from the training that you're already putting in. And then, more of like a kind of like a little bit corny, but ability to say no. Like, if your friends are going out, if you say no, you're on the front end again, getting rid of those issues that might be there for tomorrow's workout, and knowing a good balance between like living a college life and potentially developing into a professional athlete or whatever your goals may be.
Mm-hmm. No, 100%. Preparation is what we learned. Is everything. You have to prepare. You have to have the snacks that you need on hand, know what you're going to get for lunch or where you're going to go, and kind of plan it out ahead of time and be ready. And that kind of led to why we started Celo Nutrition, is because the snacks that we were given weren't the best. We were getting Uncrustables filled with fake sugar. We were given a bunch of stuff like that. So we wanted to make something that actually fueled you right and was based with good ingredients that won't lead to crashes. So that's kind of why we did that. And
you mentioned, going off that, you mentioned macronutrients. Can you give us a basic breakdown of what either you try to do, what athletes try to do, whether protein, some sugars, fats, just a generality?
Okay, so especially with all the modern apps and stuff, it's pretty easy to find your resting metabolic rate, and even before that, your basal metabolic rate.
Like what kind of apps can you use
so like
that?
simple like Whoop, you put a Whoop on, it'll show you how many calories you burn a day. So now you know kind of what to aim for throughout your day or your week. And then from that, you want to have, for most baseball athletes, there's going to be some variance here, but about 40 to 60% of your meals are from carbohydrates, or percentage of food from carbohydrates. About 25 ish percent is going to be from protein, and then the remainder will be from fat, depending on the amount that you use from your carbohydrates. And from protein, typically you want to have, to keep it simple, about 1 gram per pound of body weight. So say you weigh 200 pounds, or about 200 grams of protein throughout the day. It doesn't have to be spaced out perfectly, but try to not get it all in one sitting, so it's a little bit easier on digestion and it gets more absorption.
And not all in a powder form. Like real food should be most of that protein with supplementation to
Correct.
help get there.
And
Yeah.
I was going to add right on that. I see these things like protein coffees and waters. So like stemming off to that question, most of your protein should come from like pretty well sourced real foods, things like that.
So like even like spinning it all the way back from the beginning of the conversation, like for you, Lucas, you had a private trainer, you know, or other people have group training. Like most people don't think about these things on at all, really, to be honest with you. So like having some insight of like, okay, I'm used to doing X, Y, and Z. How can I better my day? So it doesn't have to be perfect, but like, you know, you guys are bringing in a nice quality, you know, brand to help things get a much more, you know, easily available and digestible, convenient, still tastes good. You know, if you're used to eating Pop-Tarts all the time, it's going to be tough to go to like a super healthy, well-balanced diet like you're mentioning. But working in that direction is key. So yeah, you know, lean proteins, complex carbohydrates, fruits, vegetables. You want to push as much of that into your day as possible and avoid as much DoorDash and fast food and things like that. And then when you need to supplement, you use a higher quality brand like yourself, where you know you guys are putting the right ingredients in the body, where it still doesn't taste terrible. You know, it should be taste pretty good, and so you actually have motivation to have it. And now you're having balance throughout your day. And again, makes you recovered, helps you train better, helps you perform better, and so on and so forth.
100%.
I've got a movement question for you to get off the topic of nutrition, even though nutrition is great. Is there a correct way to move, or is it individualized for different people? For example, guys who are knee over toe, or like guys who are good at getting into that hip hinge.
So there's going to be some biases there where, like, again, you don't want to put yourself into positions that are going to cause injury or overly risky. But if your knees go over your toes a little bit, you're not going to die. But, you know, you might not want to put that much shear stress onto your knees. So there's always, it depends. You can look at someone's mechanics, like if you look at Greg Maddox's pitching mechanics versus Tim Lincecum, they both worked great for themselves for a long time. Both Cy Young winners, totally different stuff going on. But there is more like optimal mechanics where it's safer and more repeatable, but it's in the context of who you're working with, and especially like with heavy loads on your back or certain things in exercise. You know, there's much safer ways to get things done. And then if you're doing something like, say, like extreme knees over toes, you want to ask yourself, what's the why? Like, what's the benefit of me getting better at this stimulus so my knees are able to move in that angle? Like, you know, if you are, you know, in gymnastics, or maybe, you know, like a basketball player where you might have a lot of knee dive for certain movements, like it could be beneficial to train in those patterns, whereas other athletes, like, it's really counterintuitive. So again, it just depends on that.
So as a trainer, like when you see somebody move in a certain way, your first evaluation is, how can I make this work for them, or how can I move them towards a more optimal way?
So especially from a younger athlete, I'm going to try to teach them like the more standard optimal way to make sure that their body is kind of working in the right direction. Whereas say it's a professional athlete coming in and they already have certain patterns that have worked for them, I'm going to be a little more lenient on letting them keep some of the qualities they have, assuming they're not a risk factor. Whereas if you're, you know, if you're pitching and your elbow's in a really valgus state and it's putting a lot of torque on your UCL, I might have certain correctives from band work or, you know, whatever we might be doing to get them out of those positions, at least to some degree. It doesn't have to be a complete change. And then also it depends on the athlete's buy-in. Like if they're not receptive, then it's difficult for me to pull teeth. I want to make sure, you know, we're on the same page. And ultimately there are optimal ways your muscles and certain things work together. It helps create more force, but also everyone's going to be slightly different based off of, you know, genetics, predisposition, and preference.
Yeah, I want to dive into that hip hinge because it's so important for this sport, obviously, in baseball. You know, building up to the season, I always felt like I can hold it very well. You know, we would train, I'd go, and then I felt like during the season I would lose it and I would get out of that back hip. What are some movement patterns or some drills or some things that I could have done or people can do to keep that hinge feeling strong? Like I would feel like I can hold it, but my hip would feel tight and I would, get out of that position and kind of just fall towards the ball rather than staying loaded and then being able to turn.
So just to be sure everyone like totally gets it, like for hip hinging, whether you're pitching or hitting, like you want to be deep into a coil to help, load force up and then fire out of it. And usually the biggest limitations are hip mobility restrictions. So a lot of hip variations where the joint is actually tight, so that once being rigid, so they can't stay in the positions that they're targeting, even if they know what they're trying to achieve. Or instability, so weakness. Potentially they do like a ton of anterior work, like quad base, so they might need to do more hamstrings or adductor, where it's making that area around the joint much more mobile, stable, and able to fire effectively. So the drills itself, you could do like hip rotations on the wall where you're standing and going through ranges of motion, maybe 90-90 hip flips where you're flipping over at certain angles. You might have an isometric, so it means you're like stabilizing in a certain position where it feels weak, so it gets more acquired to holding that position. It feels more comfortable. Or if it's a movement like deficiency, they might need broad jumps, so it's more power output in that range of motion. It kind of depends on who it is,
what they need.
But most people don't do almost any of those things. So all the mobility and posterior chain work is going to be a huge impact in most, if not all, incoming athletes, training programs.
I mean,
To tag right off that, a young player who's going to play a high school, a summer, and a fall season, what is one way that they can maintain their strength, they can maintain their body weight, if not add a little bit through a long season?
Okay, so body weight is actually really critical. Like if you look at the average Major League Baseball player now versus 20, 30 years ago, it's about 20 pounds heavier. Wow. So it shows the mass difference and importance of being big while strong and athletic, and that's where training's come a long way. And that's even post steroid era, so it's naturally done. So keeping your body weight up is essential. That's a big complaint for athletes, like, oh, it's difficult during season. So just again, maybe using the whoop and a scale, seeing how much you're burning and trying to match those calories, at least within reason, or having some awareness will keep your weight up throughout season, which is going to be huge. And then, what was the second part of the question? Make sure I got it.
Staying fresh on performance too,
okay.
Because you're going to have those weeks where you play 7 games and those weeks where you play 2. It's a big mix.
Yeah, so you have to know which season matters most for you too. For a high school athlete, like you can't be peaking all year long. Whereas, maybe fall ball should be used for more development, whereas maybe summer might be your showcases. It's even more important than your spring ball, okay? It just depends on the athlete, whereas, if you're a kid just trying to make the team, yeah, you might need to peak for spring ball because if you don't make the team, you don't get to play. So everyone's situation is going to depend a little bit, but you want to make sure you're just, again, planning out what's going on, prioritizing strength when you have more time to be sore, whereas, if you have 5 games in a week, it's not the time to do, max effort deadlifts or certain harder, more inflammation-based training. And in season, doing a lot of mobility, explosiveness is going to keep you fresh and keeping those results staying around, so that way next fall you can kind of restart and kind of reset your body for a better season coming again.
Yeah, 100%. I know you're super busy. You have, lessons and sessions with people all day long. What's a day in the life look like for you?
Every day is a little different, but typically early wake up around maybe 5:30 or just before 6. Come to the gym, make sure everything's set up well, so that way maybe there's a random power outage. I want to make sure my clients don't drive here for nothing. Make sure it's presentable like you would in a restaurant, very clean. I'll have various sessions throughout the day. Ranging again from a developing athlete that's just learning how to squat to a high-level professional athlete that plans to be a all-star this year, or people just looking for general health, awareness from nutrition or weight loss. So my plethora of athletes or clients is pretty much as can be, which is really engaging and exciting for me. Throughout the day, get my own workouts in if possible. Have my meals, my day, answer messages, play with my dog.
Do you meal prep?
It depends. I do and don't certain weeks. I think like anybody, you're going to have some monotony where you don't want to always do the same thing every week, but you want to have the same principles every week. So I make sure I hit my calories. I make sure I focus on things that are achieving my own goals and my own health, because when people see me, I think I'm my first selling point. If I don't look the part, it's going to be difficult for me to tell people how to be healthy or more athletic.
Yeah, you don't want a fat trainer.
Typically it's not ideal. And then I want to make sure I can do the movements my athletes are asking me to show so that I can show them with proficiency so it makes sense, and kind of just like follow my lead. And if I'm doing it with no goal in mind besides being a trainer, like it should be very easy for an athlete that wants to be at a higher level to kind of emulate all that stuff.
When you do meal prep, what do you do?
Look at how many calories again I need to eat throughout the day. I base it out. I'm not a huge lunch guy, especially being with a lot of clients throughout the day.
Same here.
So I try to kind of front and back load my days where I'll have a pretty heavy lunch or breakfast, a very light or snack based meals throughout the day for lunch, and then for dinner, pretty heavy load at the night. So that way, I'm still getting my calories in. It makes me feel full before I'm with clients, but then I don't feel like stuffed while I'm on the floor. And then at night again, I feel full again before bed. So I can go to bed pretty quick. So I have to wake up in the morning next day and run it back.
So you don't really bring anything here. It's kind of just eat at home, have some
I
snacks
do.
here.
I have a microwave, and so I can reheat. Certain times I'll bring either leftover meals from the night before, or pre-prep chicken and quinoa or whatever it might be. But I try to have a lot of variance. Whereas when I was younger, I literally eat the same thing every day for months and months and months. Where that could be really good too. But I feel like it kind of added some monotony into my days that are already very rigid. So having some freedom from that is good for my own mental health, honestly. Yeah.
100%. Do you have any hobbies? Like I feel like you just have no time. You work 7 days a week. What do you do for fun?
So I enjoy my job, so that's lucky. So I would say that is fun, and I'm very lucky to be where I'm at. To be honest with you, it's been quite a journey. I love hanging out with my wife, my dog, and when I can hang out with either former clients or friends, I do that. But like I mentioned before, like ability to say no. Right now, I know what's most important in my life, so I try to hone in on those things, and then whenever there is extra free time, might play video games or certain things that I used to do a lot more when I was younger. But trying to balance everything is at times challenging. I like wakeboarding. I like to go to the beach.
I've seen the videos. You're pretty good.
I'm decent at that stuff, and I find that really fun. It's just trying to add it in a little more would be ideal.
Yeah. Do you read? Do you read at all?
A lot of audiobooks. So when I do my training, I like to learn when I'm training instead of listening to music, because I listen to music throughout my sessions already.
Yeah. No, it gets crazy when you just listen to Drake for 10 hours straight. It kind of gets annoying. You got to mix it up a little bit.
If the clients like it, I'll listen to whatever they want. But I listen to a lot of audiobooks. I don't really like to read them because it's like I can't do other things at the same time.
Yeah, you're busy.
Mix up those things, whether it's psychology, training, finance. A big variance, motivation.
Do you have some recommendations? Like must reads, top 5, Mount Rushmore.
I'll go with a few. I really like Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey.
Huge, my favorite.
That was engaging for me. I liked The Psychology of Money, so like how to actually keep your money if you're making it, and financially literate basically. Some stuff like maybe motivational, Can't Hurt Me. That was David Goggins. It's a little bit aggressive for many, but that was pretty good.
Yeah, it'll fire you up.
Extreme Ownership. Jocko, basically accountability. And It Takes What It Takes, which is again another motivator.
Yeah.
And
Trevor Moore.
We had to read that at Wake before.
That's a great book.
Yeah, that was a great one.
And those are like big of how I try to live my life and try to stay motivated and positive, and make sure that you're making the most of your time and your efforts and things like that. And then obviously training, but that's boring stuff for exercise science guys, and I wouldn't recommend many of those things for people who aren't really super passionate about that.
I got one more question for you. What is the vision for APA, All Phase Athletics, 5-year plan? Your vision.
So I don't want to get into too much, hype. I just want to make sure that we're still around. Myself and the training staff still really enjoys what they do. People know that they come here and they get the results that they're coming for. They know, we're going to be motivated and ready to help them get their results, and just continue to develop as a brand. Potentially bring on more trainers as we see fit, and just enjoy our day and make sure everyone's getting high quality training, and as training advances, we continue to advance at the highest level as well.
Yeah,
all about the player,
building the community,
Exactly.
the APA community.
Nice.
So,
one piece of advice for somebody who wants to become a strength coach.
Make sure you're committed to it, because it's a lot of time and a lot of effort, but if you end up doing it, it's going to be highly rewarding, and you're going to feel like you're a huge part of a lot of people's process in life, while still knowing that it's them on the field, it's their life changing, and not making it about you is really important.
Nice.
Right on.
I love it.
Well, yeah. Thank you so
Yep.
much. We know you're super busy. We
For sure.
don't want to take too much of your time,
Thank you,
but
John,
Yeah.
appreciate it.
John
Thank you.
McCoy, All Phase Athletics in Miami. Let's do it.